Britain's most violent prisoner has never killed anyone. 52 years locked away. And it all began with £26. Rewind. 1974. A small sub-post office in Little Sutton, a quiet corner of Cheshire in the north of England. A 22-year-old former circus strongman walks in carrying a sawn-off shotgun. He walks out with £26 and 18 pence, worth maybe £300 today, less than a decent week's wages. For that, a judge hands him 7 years. He will end up serving more than 50. In 2008, Tom Hardy turned this man into a cult icon in a film called Bronson. Hollywood gave you the myth, a grinning showman on a velvet stage narrating his own legend. Here's what actually happened. His name was Michael Gordon Peterson. The world knows him as Charles Bronson. He has taken hostages 11 times. He has staged 9 rooftop protests. He has been moved more than 120 times through Britain's prisons and asylums. And in half a century of violence, he never took a single life. This is the story of how a gentle boy from Luton became a one-man war against the British prison system. No bodies, no empire, no escape plan. Just one man and a system, locked together for 50 years, each one making the other worse. And it leaves a question the courts still cannot answer. Is he locked up because he is dangerous? Or is he dangerous because he is locked up? Start at the beginning, because the beginning makes no sense. Michael Gordon Peterson was born on the 6th of December, 1952, in Luton, an industrial town north of London. His parents, Ara and Joe Peterson, ran social clubs and kept a respectable home. His aunt and uncle served as mayor and mayoress. This was not a crime family. This was a family of framed photographs and Sunday dinners. His aunt told the BBC he was a lovely lad, gentle, mild-mannered, never a bully, a boy who defended the weak. Hold on to that sentence. You are about to watch that boy disappear. In his early teens, the family moved north to Ellesmere Port in Cheshire, and something shifted. By 13, he was running with a small gang of thieves, and standing in a juvenile court. He skipped school constantly. He fought for fun. His first job was stacking shelves at a supermarket. It lasted 2 weeks, and it ended when he attacked his manager. He smashed up a row of parked cars after an argument with a girlfriend's father, and got his first taste of a cell on remand. At 19, he was convicted for his part in a smash-and-grab raid and walked away with a suspended sentence. For a while, he worked as a circus strongman, bending bars and wearing the handlebar mustache that became the most famous facial hair in British crime. In 1971, he met a woman named Irene. They married young. Their son Michael was born the following year, barely 20, a wife, a baby, and no money to feed either of them. Which brings us back to that post office. See how this crime actually worked, because it explains what followed. The opportunity was simple. A small village sub-post office held cash behind one wooden counter, with no cameras and no guards. The execution took less than a minute. One man, one sawn-off shotgun, one terrified counter. The money was the punchline, £26 and 18 pence. The problem was everything else. The police caught up with him fast. The gun made it armed robbery, and armed robbery meant serious time. 7 years. Here's the thing. A 7-year sentence, served quietly, could have had him home before he turned 30. Wife, son, a second chance. Instead, Michael Peterson walked through the gates of Walton Jail in Liverpool and made the decision that would consume the rest of his life. He decided the prison itself was the enemy. Michael Peterson walked into Walton in 1974. In every way that matters, he never walked out. The war started almost immediately. At Walton, he attacked 2 fellow inmates and was shipped to Hull. At Hull, he went after a prisoner with a glass jug and was shipped to Armley Jail in Leeds. That became the pattern. Attack, solitary. Transfer, repeat. Every assault added time to his sentence, and every added year made him angrier. In 1976, at Wandsworth in London, he tried to poison the prisoner in the cell next to his. That earned him a ticket to Parkhurst on the Isle of Wight, the island fortress where Britain warehoused its hardest men. And at Parkhurst, something strange happened. He found friends, the Kray twins, Ronnie and Reggie, the gangland kings of 1960s London, took a liking to the young powerhouse. He would later call them the best two guys he ever met. Picture it. A young man alone in a concrete box, pounding out press-ups by the thousand, he claims, and taking life advice from Britain's most famous murderers. By 1978, after an attack on a prison officer and a suicide attempt, the system reached a verdict. Michael Peterson was not bad, he was mad. He was certified and sent to Broadmoor, the most infamous high-security psychiatric hospital in the country. You have to understand what Broadmoor meant. It was the end of the line, the place for the men no prison could explain. And even there, he stood out. At Broadmoor, he tried to strangle a fellow patient named Gordon Robinson with a silk tie. The tie tore. Robinson lived. Stop on that detail. A few threads of silk giving way is the only reason this story contains no murder. The coroner never opened a file. The fabric failed first. Depression followed. Then, a gift from an old friend. From his own Broadmoor wing, Ronnie Kray arranged for boxing champion Terry Downs to visit and lift his spirits. Then he discovered the roof. In 1982, he got above his ward, climbed onto the roof of Broadmoor, and began tearing off tiles. Here is how a rooftop protest worked, because he turned it into a signature. The opportunity was the building itself. Broadmoor was Victorian, all ledges and pipework, and it took one unwatched moment to get up there. Once a man was on the roof, nobody could touch him. Sending officers up meant a fight at height that could kill everyone involved. So the execution was pure endurance. Sit, tear, throw, make the damage so expensive that somebody important has to listen. The money tells you how well it worked. In June 1983, he went up a second time and stayed for 3 days, peeling the roof apart tile by tile while the newspapers watched. The bill reached £250,000, close to $1 million in today's money, and the problem was the ending, because there was no demand money could settle. His own family had to come and talk him down. Hold that thought, because a decision is coming that nobody in this story has ever been able to explain. It arrives in October 1987. First, the system tried everything else. He staged a third rooftop protest demanding a transfer, came down, then starved himself for 18 days until the authorities blinked. In June 1984, they moved him to Ashworth Hospital on Merseyside, where he stabbed a patient with a broken sauce bottle after the man made advances at him, and now the doctors threw up their hands. Their conclusion, in effect, was that he was not insane at all. He was simply violent. In 1985, they returned him to ordinary prison, where he punched an inmate on his first day back in the general population. Back at Walton, he staged another 3-day rooftop protest, did £100,000 of damage, and collected an extra year on his sentence. In 1986 alone, he was transferred 8 times. In early 1987, he got his hands around the throat of the governor of Wormwood Scrubs. On the 3rd of January 1987, he landed at Gartree, where he served out the rest of his time in isolation. The asylums could not cure him. The prisons could not hold him. So in October 1987, Britain did the one thing nobody saw coming. It let him go. 13 years after a 7-year sentence began, the gate opened and Michael Peterson walked out a free man. Now remember one number, 69. That is exactly how many days this freedom is going to last. He did not know the number. You do. Watch how he spends it. His family met him at the gate, and he spent a few days with his parents in Aberystwyth on the Welsh coast. Then the freedom got strange, fast. He bought a water pistol, modified it, and used it to intimidate a stranger into driving him to Luton. Hours into liberty, he was committing crimes with a toy. Then came the East End of London and the fight game. Unlicensed boxing was a cash machine hiding in plain sight. The opportunity was an underground circuit of warehouse fights, gangland audiences, and money that never saw a tax form. The connection was a promoter who looked at this shaven-headed powerhouse with a handlebar mustache and saw a walking payday. The execution was simple. Put him in front of anyone and let nature take its course. By his own account, he fought grown men and once even a Rottweiler, and you can decide for yourself how much of that to believe. The money came in cash purses and side bets, and the rebrand was the Masterstroke. The promoter said Michael Peterson was no name for a fighter, and suggested the name of a Hollywood tough guy instead. Charles Bronson, the American star of Death Wish. If you have seen the film, you remember this exact scene. For once, the movie got it dead right. That is truly how it happened. Michael Peterson died in an East End gym. Charlie Bronson was born. The problem, as always, was the man himself. He had a girlfriend. Reports say he wanted a ring for her. And on the 7th of January, 1988, day 69, he robbed a jewelry store. The film softened this into a heartbreak story about a rejected proposal. The record is simpler and sadder. 69 days. That was the entire harvest of 13 years inside. The courts gave him 7 more. Back inside, the war resumed, but something in it had curdled. This was no longer a young man raging against a sentence. This was a man whose whole identity now lived behind bars. At Gartree, he punched 2 prison officers. At Franklin, he took the deputy governor hostage. The system moved him around like a live grenade. Bristol, Birmingham, Winchester, back to Wandsworth. Then Parkhurst again, where the violence finally came back for him. At least 2 prisoners cornered him and stabbed him in the back several times. He survived. And when the police came asking for names, he gave them nothing. Whatever else he was no informer. And in his world, that mattered more than the blood. In November 1992, the gates opened a second time. He was photographed grinning in a field with a dog named Della, a free man with a girlfriend named Kellyanne, and something that almost looked like a future. It lasted 53 days. He was arrested for conspiracy to rob and remanded to the brand-new Woodhill prison near Milton Keynes. Remember that name. Woodhill will matter until the very last line of this story. On the 9th of February, 1993, the robbery charges collapsed and were dismissed. He was fined £600 for breaking the nose of Kellyanne's lover, and he walked out the door. 16 days. That is how long it took before he was arrested again, this time for conspiracy to rob and possession of a sawn-off shotgun. He told the jury the shotgun was never meant for any robbery. He said it was for blowing his own head off. On the 14th of September, 1993, a jury found him guilty of intent to rob 8 years. And now began the strangest, darkest chapter of the whole story, the siege years. While on remand, he took a prison librarian hostage and issued his demands to the police negotiators, an inflatable doll, a helicopter, and a cup of tea. The film staged its librarian siege as a naked, greased-up brawl with the riot squad. The real ending was stranger than anything a screenwriter would dare. Bronson released his hostage in disgust after the man farted in front of him. That is in the record. Laugh if you want. The system did not. They took him to Wakefield, where he spent 40 days naked in an isolation cell. And by 1994, he was being housed in a specially built cage. Here's the thing about the sieges, and it is the key to understanding this man. Break one down like a crime, because that is what they were. The opportunity was the system's own chaos. Civilian workers, constant transfers, 1,000 unlocked moments. The execution was always the same: grab, barricade, demand. And the demands were half terror and half theater, designed to make the whole country stare, but look for the money, because there was none. That was the point. The currency of a Bronson siege was control. This was a man who could not choose his own food, his own clothes, or when his own light went off. For a few hours, holding a hostage, he ran the entire building. Governors called him. Negotiators listened to him. The problem was arithmetic. Every siege added years, and every year in deeper isolation made the next siege more likely. Psychologists who reviewed his case have argued that the punishment was manufacturing the crime. Around and around it went. In October 1996, a doctor named Robert Taylor arrived for an unexpected visit, and an unsettled Bronson took him hostage on the spot. Half an hour later, he came to his senses and released him, and Taylor refused to help any prosecution. Then came the most infamous siege of all. Bronson seized hostages who included Iraqi prisoners, men who had themselves hijacked a plane, and the accounts read like a fever dream. He reportedly made them tickle his feet and address him as general, and his demand list included an axe, 2 guns, 5,000 rounds of ammunition, and a plane to Libya. The newspapers printed it as comedy. Inside the system, nobody was laughing anymore. By 1999, at Hull Prison, something rare was happening. Bronson was calm. He was drawing. Art had gotten into him during the asylum years, cartoons and strange creatures and poems, and the staff encouraged it. One of them was a civilian education worker from Huddersfield, a teacher, not a guard. His name was Phil Danielson. Remember that name, because Phil Danielson is about to offer one honest opinion about a piece of art. It will cost him his health, his career, and very nearly his life. And it will cost Charlie Bronson every last chance he ever had of going home. January 1999, Danielson criticized one of Bronson's drawings. That was the entire offense, a teacher doing exactly what teachers do. To a stable man, it was feedback. To Bronson, after 25 years of cells and cages, it landed like a declaration of war. He came for Danielson. He looped a skipping rope around the teacher's neck. He dragged him through the prison at knife point. And then he began destroying Hull Prison around them both, hurling furniture, throwing refrigeration units across the floor like they were chairs. At one point he wrenched a washing machine clean out of the wall, and the effort knocked him unconscious for several minutes. His own violence, for a moment, defeated him. Then he got up and carried on. Hour after hour, negotiators talking. A terrified teacher tied like an animal. The siege ran through one full day, into a second, and toward a third. 44 hours. Then he let Phil Danielson go. Now the cold facts. Danielson received £65,000 from the Home Office in an out-of-court settlement. He was left with post-traumatic stress and acute anxiety. He never worked again. For years, simply driving past a prison could trigger a panic attack. He said the experience left his career in ruins, and that he had assumed the people running the prison were trained to protect a civilian like him. Clearly, he said, they were not. In 2000, Bronson stood trial in Luton, the town where his whole story began. The sentence was discretionary life with a minimum term of just 3 years. Read that again. 3 years. That minimum expired in 2003, and he is still inside more than 2 decades later. Here is the trap that keeps him there. To be released, he must prove he can behave in less restrictive conditions. But his record is exactly what keeps him out of less restrictive conditions. The door has a lock that can only be opened from a room he is not allowed to enter. In 1999, the authorities built a special close supervision unit at Woodhill for him, and 2 of the only other men in England considered as dangerous. The boy from Luton had become infrastructure. So where did everyone end up? Phil Danielson never got his old life back. Irene, the first wife, had moved on decades earlier. In 2001, at Woodhill, Bronson married a woman named Syra Riemann, who had first seen his photograph in a newspaper. He briefly converted to Islam for her. The marriage lasted 4 years. In 2017, he married a soap actress named Paula Williamson. That marriage collapsed too, and she died in 2019. And in 2014, the man performed one final transformation. He legally killed off Charlie Bronson and renamed himself Charles Salvador, after the artist Salvador Dali, declaring the violent man dead and the artist born. The art, at least, is real. He has won more prison art awards than any inmate in British history, and his paintings have been auctioned to raise thousands of pounds for charity, including treatment for a sick child. In March 2023, he became only the second prisoner in British history granted a public parole hearing, where he told the judges he had eaten more porridge than Goldilocks and the Three Bears, and that he wanted to go home. The answer was no. His ninth attempt was still being fought over in early 2026. As it stands, he remains at Woodhill, 73 years old. 52 years served, 122 days of freedom since 1974. So what is the verdict on the film? Here is what it got right. The pathetic 26-pound robbery and the 7-year sentence are documented fact. The fight promoter really did rebrand him with a Hollywood tough guy's name. The 69 days of freedom are real, counted to the day. And that mustache is more authentic than you know, because the real Bronson shaved off his own and had it sent to Tom Hardy to wear in the film. Now here is what it changed. The Velvet Theater, the stage monologues, the applauding audience, all pure invention. The tragic proposal was really a jewelry store robbery. And the deepest distortion is the ending, which turns the hostage-taking of an art teacher into one strange, beautiful painting come to life. The real Phil Danielson spent 44 hours with a rope around his neck and the rest of his life carrying the damage. And the film never once shows what became of him. Hollywood made the violence into art. The record shows it only ever made victims. 50 years on, the question from the start of this story still has no answer. The system built a cage strong enough to hold Michael Peterson. It just never built a door he was able to walk through.